The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Welcome to a Psychiatric first, namely having a guest on our channel. We've not done that before. This will be compiled into a YouTube video and on the subject of extra-dimensional entities, which is one of the hypotheses that Psychiatric have been pushing for about a year now. Just before we start, just a quick introductions of myself. First of all, I am David John, the CEO and founder of the Psychiatric, currently serving as a volunteer police officer here within the UK, and ex-serving officer with Britain's National Crime Agency, who are akin to the FBI there in America. Both basically leading the fight to cut serious and organised crime. And our guest this evening from Arizona is Mr. Jerry Marzinsky, who is a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 40 years of experience working with and studying the thought process of psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the nation. He was awarded the State Arizona Meritorious Service Award for Pima College Apple Award of Teaching Abnormal Psychology, which is very interesting. His former academic training comprises a BA in psychology from Temple University, a master's degree in counselling from University of Georgia, and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. He's also the co-author of the book An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower, and is currently running a private practice in Arizona. Jerry also somehow managed to squeeze in being a commercial pilot, a certified scuba diver, and a long-distance motorcyclist. He's also previously held the positions of second lieutenant in the Arizona Civil Air Patrol and an assistant scoutmaster. So welcome, Jerry, and thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
How do you do all that?
A lot of it I've done in the past. You know, the flying days are over. I still have a commercial ticket. I still have a certification for scuba diving.
Wow.
You know.
I would love to do scuba diving, but I have a tinnitus ear problem. If I go below 10 meters, I'm in loads of pain. So
you gotta equalize the pressure behind your eardrums. There's a way to do that.
Yeah, I probably wasn't taught that, so I was in a lot of pain.
Yeah, it could blow your eardrum out.
Yeah, definitely. So again, thank you for joining us. This is, as I explained before the call, an open investigation for the Psychiatric to look at what we term extra-dimensional entities, or EDEs, as I may refer to them. I'm trying to take away the mystique of the word demon, because demon, I think, has a lot of negative inclinations with that and meanings. And also, I strongly believe by referring to these things with that name just empowers them even more. So we decided to give them a different label completely. Now, EDEs can be in all different forms, but yeah. But before we dive into that, I'd like to really know what really pushed you towards your career in psychology, really.
Well, I came from a fairly dysfunctional family. You know, there was a lot of anger and violence and shouting and, you know, kind of insanity. So that was like my training to go into this area. You know, so after I finished all my academic training and then took a job at one of the biggest, if not the biggest, psychiatric hospital on the planet, I was already used to all the craziness. You know, it was like I'd grown up with it. So these guys would come and they'd do all these weird stuff, and I'd go, "Well, what else you got?" You know. So it was already, I was already trained for it. I kind of resented it to start with. I'm like, you know, why me? Why did I have to go through all this garbage? But you know, where I ended up, there was no better training. You know, the graduate school didn't prepare me for working in these psychiatric hospitals at all. And the counseling techniques they taught were minimally effective and virtually not effective at all with schizophrenics.
So was that since childhood you've experienced those sort of problems at home and experiences?
Yeah. So I was used to it. It was it didn't take me by surprise. It didn't scare me. I was more curious, like what is going on? Why is this happening?
Where was the crossover between that and the paranormal side of things for you? I take it there is I mean, did they come hand in hand, or did the paranormal side come later?
The paranormal side came. I was always kind of interested in spiritual stuff. I was always reading spiritual stuff, and the university was just bone dry spiritually. I mean, it was just bone dry. It was like, the Sahara Desert as far as spiritual anything. And I knew people were spiritual beings, and they weren't dealing with that part at all. They totally ignored it. So they didn't want to go into spirituality because they couldn't measure it, they couldn't define it, they couldn't capture it, they couldn't experiment with it. So even though psychology means the study of spirit, they avoided it like the plague.
And that's the shame of all this, because in science it seems that if an academic didn't write a book on it, or you can't measure it and weigh it, then to them it doesn't exist, which is ludicrous. I mean, there's lots of, the theories of string theory and multiple dimensions. They can't be weighed and measured, but yet they're starting to accept that these things is a reality of ours. So it is a shame that we're still up against this today, isn't it? I think.
Well, it is, and you know what? They're starting to break through it. There's a brand new cutting edge energetic psychotherapy that it's hit the scenes recently. It's called the Mace energy method, which uses a strict body of scientific work, but also blends it with spiritual work, and neither one will work by itself. They have to be blended and meshed together. And then they will get rid of what it will dissolve trauma in an hour. Major traumas that the person isn't even aware of. You can read about it on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. We made a few videos of it, but it's a energetic, spiritual, scientific mixture that will get rid of lifelong trauma in an hour. It's gone.
I've got that as one of my questions, actually asking you what the mace is. So that'd be interesting to discuss that a bit later on, actually, because one of the things I'm very passionate about is trying to understand how we deal with these energies, how we're going to actually go about curing people and freeing them from them. Because my strong belief is that nothing is stronger than your own free will, but you can be tricked into giving it up. And I think it's our own free will, which is a bit of a key to this, is understanding who you are, what you are, and where these voices are really coming from, rather than, as you've put in your document, about hallucinations. With science always explain everything they don't quite understand as a hallucination. To you, what's the difference between a schizophrenic experiencing voices in the head and a standard hallucination?
Well, standard hallucinations are just random. They're all over the place. They're positive, they're negative, they're neutral. They don't make any sense. You can't carry on a conversation with them. The voices are very different. They run fixed set patterns that repeat over and over and over again. And you can find those. I sent you those patterns. Hallucinations do not run patterns. The voices do run patterns. They're negative. They're anti-religious. They foster and create negative emotion. They're energetically drain their victims. So we got 23 patterns that these things run. So energy itself is invisible. The way you know it's there is by the effect it has on physical reality. And these 23 patterns are the effect that these voices, these entities have on physical reality and the human being.
So what sort of patients do you start working with in your sort of early career? Because I'm really interested to try and understand at which point through your career that you realised something different was happening, rather than just going with the general, this is hallucination. Was there a single event that made you go, hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense? That there is a consciousness behind this?
Well, there kind of was. But I was just thrown into the mix. It was I was just thrown into the jungle.
Yeah.
Because nothing in undergraduate or graduate school prepared me for what I was going to encounter in this humongous psychiatric hospital. I think there were 10,000 patients there when I first got there. Every type of mental illness known to man was in there somewhere. But what I hated about psychology is that you had to take everything they said as truth. You could not test it out for yourself. You couldn't go, hey, I want to go to a mental health center and I want to talk to some of these guys and see for myself. Or I want to go into a psychiatric hospital. I want to talk to some of those patients and see for myself. You couldn't do that. So here's 4 years of them cramming all this psychological garbage down your throat, and you have no way to verify it. The only one that I could verify was experimental psychology, where you could go into a rat lab and you can start running these different patterns, these different reinforcement patterns, and you could see the effect that it had. But a lot of this stuff that these guys are talking about, you can't get into a psychiatric hospital or a mental health center or anything like that. They won't let you in. And in the close to 45 years I was working at these different mental health facilities, I never ever saw a researcher on the front lines, ever. They won't let them in. They go, oh, we can't take the risk, or it's too dangerous, or we don't have the staff to walk you around, or and they won't let them in.
Right.
So all this stuff generated about schizophrenia and mental health is coming out of the university. So we're taken over by the deep state, back in the 30s when the Rockefellers took over the medical industry.
Yeah.
And with what they call it, the Flexner Report, they paid off Congress to make a law that the only legal medical students that they could graduate had to be graduated from a pharmacological program.
Right.
So they had to teach drugs.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's, I mean, they didn't just affect the medical profession, they affected general education as well, didn't they, the Rockefellers? And I think one of the quotes I remember hearing was that they didn't want a breed of thinkers, they wanted workers.
Mm-hmm.
It affected the education system. And and another good thing I heard is that if you want a book about the actual truth of history, find a book before 1910. An issue that I have when people say, well, I'm a doctor, I have this, I have that. It's fantastic. That's demonstrated to me that that person's gone through the system, that they've understood how the system wants them to respond and behave and to practice as when they come out. That's what that certification or title means to me. What that means in the real world of this very unfunctional world that we live in is completely different. But people will only trust somebody with titles, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
Because it rules out everybody else that have got,
right.
Including people like me. I'm not a doctor, I'm not medical trained. I have worked for the NHS 4.5 years, but no way in that capacity. I've worked inside a hospital and I've seen what goes on around. And even then I used to think, what, these guys are coming back through the door like a revolving door, time and time again.
Over and over and over again. Nothing changes.
And
drug them up and let them loose.
Exactly. I mean, one funny, well, not funny story, but one story I have, I talked a young man off a car park roof one day whilst on duty. So he eventually got him down. I took him to A&E, a local hospital near here, where they had a mental health ward department. So I waited with him for 3 hours to be seen. He was calm with me. And then the experts came out and called him into the office for about 20 minutes, if that, and then He came out, then they asked me to come in. Now, bearing in mind, I'm on duty, I'm in police uniform, you know, I'm there as an officer. So I'm now standing in front of 3 experts, and they said to me, yeah, he's a regular, and shrugged their shoulders. I was like, okay. I said, yeah. And they went, well, what do you want us to do about it? I said, well, I'm a police officer. I make sure that he's not causing problems or going to kill himself in a public space. It's your duty to ensure that he's going to be looked after and is treated and doesn't keep doing this. I said, why are you asking me? I'm not the expert. And they just looked at me blankly like I was the problem. And I said, I will tell you now that you're going to have to admit him tonight because I'm not letting him back home. I don't want to let him back home. I brought him to a place of safety as it is my duty to do so. And you need to now take the reins. But the attitude was, well, he's a regular. He keeps doing this. And he does, because that wasn't the first time that young man was on a roof. And when I'm on duty, I hear his name over the radio. I think, oh, he's doing it again. You know, but one of these days, that poor lad's going to jump.
Yep.
And no one's going to care. And that, when I came out of that, when I went home after that duty, it saddened me that that's the attitude of our professional medical profession, to say we're not going to listen to the regulars. It's their fault rather than the failing of the system, is basically what I took away from that, which I think is totally wrong.
Well, it's worse than what you think. Here in the United States, very close to 50,000 people, U.S. citizens, kill themselves every year.
Yeah.
And a great majority of them are on antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs. These drugs don't cure anything. They don't fix anything. All they do is tamp down symptoms. They're very expensive. You know, 50,000, what was it? 55,000 or so soldiers died in Vietnam. Every year in the U.S., 50,000 people are killing themselves. Now, we have more psychiatrists, we have more psychologists, we have more social workers and more psychiatric drugs on the planet than ever in the history of mankind. And this is going on year after year after year after year. Right?
Well, in criminal activity, when criminal activity is being investigated, one of the things is motivation. What is the motive when you investigate something? And you got to look at this. What's the motivation, I wonder, of pharmaceutical companies just keep releasing these drugs that are really just probably doing no more than putting a band-aid on it, and maybe even causing more problems. I can't speculate, but
well, I got an answer for you right here. The global antipsychotic sales have soared to $14.54 billion in 2021. They're estimated to soar to $15.5 billion in 2022. This is $1 billion. This isn't $1 million. It's $1 billion. These drugs cure absolutely nothing. They've got the whole Western world and even the Muslims believing that this is the only way to treat schizophrenia. Antidepressant market is expected to reach $15.98 billion by 2023. Again, billion. These guys are making a fortune off of dishing out these toxic drugs that don't work. All they do is tamp down symptoms. It's criminal. And they got everybody believing that this is the only way to deal with these psychiatric problems. And it all started with a lie. I mean, it started out with Eli Lilly back in the 70s, that they came out with Prozac. They needed some way to explain why it worked. They didn't have any knowledge of why it supposedly worked. So they made one up. They said, oh, mental illness is a chemical imbalance of the brain. You know, it was a complete lie. It was like, it wasn't until late 1980s, after the release of the landmark antidepressant Prozac, that the idea of chemical imbalance hit the psychiatric mainstream. As psychiatrist Peter Brigham, 1991, points out in his book Toxic Psychiatry, the drug company Eli Lilly advanced the chemical imbalance theory as a marketing scheme to sell their new drug Prozac. There was, of course, no demonstrable evidence showing that depressed patients had any imbalance, but Lilly ran with it. Before long, psychiatrists, psychiatric patients, and the educational institutions alike came to identify with the idea that mental disorders are caused by a chemical imbalance of the brain. The total lie.
It's
A
incredible.
freaking total lie. Matter of fact, it's been disproved over and over again, and they're still putting that out in advertisements for their drugs. Oh, it is believed that, mental illness is caused by a chemical imbalance of the brain. They have no proof for that. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. And if you watch what psychiatrists do, just like you said, they'll bring the patient in for 15, 20 minutes. They'll talk to them. They'll prescribe them some drug, and off they go. So if there was a chemical imbalance in the brain, you'd think they would run them through some kind of lab work, some kind of test, EEG, EKG, labs, blood work, something to determine what chemicals are out of balance in the brain and by how much. They don't do that. In all the years I've been working with psychiatry, I have never, ever seen one of them give any blood work to determine what chemicals in the brain were out of balance. And they don't do it because they don't have such a test. It doesn't exist. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. It's a sham. It's a giant scam.
Yeah, and that was going to be one of my questions. I read that in your paper that you did mention that they don't actually know what the chemical balance should be in the first place. So there's no baseline. So for you and I, for example, let's say we're completely sane, for the sake of the argument. If they were to measure our brain chemicals, whatever they are, and baseline, let's say, what, that's the gold standard. I mean, does that even exist?
No. There is no baseline. They don't have one. Now, for psychology, there's a big research institution that did research over the articles that psychologists publish. Now, when I was in a PhD program, I could see it. It was publish or perish. You better be publishing something or you're not going to advance. If you're not helping a professor publish something, you're at the bottom of the dung pile. All right? 80%, they found that 80% of what psychologists published in research articles could not be replicated. That means it was garbage. They're publishing garbage. All right. So you got garbage coming in from psychiatry, you got garbage coming in from psychology.
So I give you full credit for you still continuing, even though you're up against such barriers the whole way through your career. My hat's off to you, that you've obviously got this conviction, you've got this knowledge now that you wish to share. It must go against everybody's sort of belief systems that have come up through your similar sort of career path. I mean, do you have colleagues that believe what you found, or are they against what you found?
Well, first of all, I couldn't talk to them about it. When I started discovering that these things, these voices were entities, that they were carrying on long, coherent conversations with these patients. It sounded like they were talking to themselves, but it was like listening to that's the other thing. I come out of here, at that point, it was like 6 years of higher education. And all they did was mention that the voices were auditory hallucinations. Never did it mention anything about what the voices were telling to these people, And I was absolutely shocked when I was hired by this big, giant psychiatric hospital, and here I could see that the patients who were listening to the voices were getting in much more trouble than the ones that weren't. I could also see they were carrying on these long, coherent conversations with them. So it was like listening to one side of a telephone conversation. You could hear the guy talking, but you couldn't hear what was coming in. And there were arguments going on with these voices. There were discussions going on with these voices. There were fights going on with these voices. It wasn't word salad like I'd come to believe from the study of psychology, and abnormal psychology. They had all these things listed, in abnormal. They described what the different behaviors were for these different mental illnesses, but they didn't have anything about what to do for them.
That's an incredible thing for me. I've seen patients talking to themselves in that way. Even just walking down the high street sometimes, and it always fascinates me. My ears prick up. I want to hear what's going on. You know, I do want to know. So yeah, to me, I find that just incredible that science can still go, well, we don't want to go down that road, so we're just going to call it that and then move on. You're completely shutting the door on something that could really help people.
One of the main symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. And they've totally, well, it was like the Egyptian priests of old. We hereby pronounce that these voices are hallucinations because we say so, without any research into the matter whatsoever.
So can I ask then, at any point when you've been speaking to a patient, have you actually been able to speak directly to what we call an EDE, the entity?
Yeah. Matter of fact, they came looking for me.
Okay, can you tell us about that?
Well, the 7 years I spent at the state hospital, I realized that these things were not hallucinations. There's something else going on. But I got into trouble with psychiatry when I started asking patients what the voices were saying. Okay. One of the patients went and complained to a psychiatrist that I was asking him questions about the voices that upset him. He didn't like that. Next morning, I was in front of the psychiatrist on a red carpet in his office, and he's telling me the voices are hallucinations. Don't be telling these people they're anything else, and don't be asking them what they're saying. All you're doing is reinforcing their hallucinations and making them worse. You know, so I was ordered not to ask any questions about them. That happened twice in the state hospital. So I spent 7 years working at that state hospital and then went back to graduate school. When I was finished with that, I took a job at the state prison in Arizona in the psychology department. Now, it was there that I learned the most about the voices, because by then Proposition 13 had come through. They closed down the vast majority of state hospitals and dumped these guys into the streets. So here you have all these psychotic patients that can't function, they can't work, they can't think straight, and the only thing they could do to survive was to rob and steal, sell drugs. So the prisons started filling up with these people at a much higher cost than it cost them to keep them in the state hospitals.
Yeah.
So here they were thinking they were saving money, and it was costing them a whole lot more to keep these guys in a prison with security and all the guards and the sensory systems and everything that's involved with running a prison. It's much more expensive.
And the same thing happened here in the UK. They call it care in the community.
Yeah, bullcrap. It's no care.
No care.
It's a bunch of garbage.
In fact, it's no care and let the community deal with it, which always means that it ends up being a police officer's job to have to deal with the episode, because these entities will take, as you know, the patients to a limit, to a point where they are, they are at risk of other people and to themselves.
Yes.
That's when.
That's the point they will start to act. That's the point they'll start to do something, but not before that. You take them to the ER if they're not a imminent danger to themselves or others. They just not get out of here.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Can I ask? I mean, again, this may be a contentious question, but so Seppi's hypotheses puts forward that these entities would have been historically labelled as, or documented as, demons. Would you agree with that observation, or do you have a slightly different view?
Nope, I fully agree with it. Now, I think we're talking about the same entities, but from what I've seen, from all the years I've been on the front lines working with schizophrenics, these entities are negative. They don't ever say anything positive. They're consistently negative, derogatory, insulting, abusive, and destructive. They're also parasites. And that's one of the first things I saw. That's one of the first patterns that I saw. They were consistently negative. Hallucinations are all over the place. They're positive, they're negative, they're just all over. Not these things. These things are consistently negative. My first question was, what holds them on such a negative pattern? Why aren't they random like all other kinds of hallucinations? Why are they consistently negative? Something is holding them on that pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a bit of research today before this interview, just to see what today's view is on schizophrenia and the causes. And the big message was they still don't actually know. They still use the chemical imbalance lie, as you've mentioned already. And they also said the word parasite is important here. They also said that it came from a family, through the bloodline. That is,
Well, it could. I think, how to go paranormally, it could. That follows bloodlines. But there's another thing going on too, is the schizophrenic mother or father will treat the kids in a manner that prepares them for these entities to enter.
exactly. Oh, that's where I was going to get to, is because the word parasite is absolutely spot on, because that's what they are. They need to keep surviving. They don't have a life expectancy like we do. They're probably made of energy, therefore we can't destroy them in the same way that we could be physically destroyed ourselves, although spiritually we can't. So we can't kill them. Therefore, their view of time is very different to ours.
Yes.
5 minutes.
There is no time, there is no space, there is no matter where they're at.
So they're absolutely grooming, I think, the kids to jump to them next, and all it takes is their energy to move or to be invited, a trauma in that child's life. And
yes,
trust me, that if they're growing up with parents like that, they're getting trauma every other week. So when I'm in today's, this is what, where we think, schizophrenics are, it still backs up everything that we're trying to push as an open investigation. What you're also stating in your documents, that these things are parasitic and they are real, and the medical profession have to wake up. Now, saying that, they're not going to wake up because they're making money, right?
Right.
So that's our problem. So it comes to us, people such as yourself and my agency and everybody else. We all need to now start waking up, I believe, to start battering these things backwards and putting them back where they belong. We can't kill them, but we can definitely send them away. We can stop their food source. Now, I just want to come on to that with you to see what you feel of this as well. As you'll probably know, everything is vibrational, isn't it? Every atom in our body is vibrating at a particular frequency. If it didn't do that, we wouldn't be here. Just like when you change the station on the radio and you use your radio analogy in your paper, I noted. So, but just changing our frequency slightly can put us in a completely different dimension or state of reality. So I truly believe that these entities are on a different vibrational level and
much lower vibrational level.
Yeah, and that's why they keep the victims or their host in a low vibrational state so they can continue to feed.
Yes.
Now, people have a problem with that, with feeding, because they think food is physical, like an apple or pie. It's not. If you look at an apple, it's still energy. We consume that. It's still vibrating. That has to exist. It goes into our system and digests in a vibrational machine. That's all we are, really. So we're converting that food into energy, aren't we?
Well, here's an experiment you can run if you can ever get into a mental health center where these people are. What I did is I noticed, and this was at the state hospital, I noticed that after the voices attacked these people, they had no energy left. And it was consistent. It was with almost every single one. Now, they didn't seem to notice that, but I did. So I started asking them about it, and they affirmed, after the voices attacked, I didn't have any energy left. So what I did is I just did a simple experiment, 1 to 10. How much energy did you have before the voices attacked? And then another sheet, 1 to 10. How much energy did you have after the voices attacked and left? It was statistically significant. I think we ran an analysis of variance over it, and it proved statistically significant. that the energy level they had after the voices attacked was statistically less.
Yeah. Yeah, that does not surprise me in the slightest. And I don't, yeah, and you must have experienced this yourself, being in the presence of them, that I can be around somebody who I feel has an attachment, and I can feel physically zapped afterwards as well.
Yes. I ran into that same thing in the prison because I was fascinated with it. I was fascinated with what I was finding, but it took working directly with these people and asking them about their voices. So what I did in the prison is, see, unlike in the state hospital, they didn't want you upsetting schizophrenics because they were attacking psychiatrists at a rate higher than any other doctor out there.
Right.
They were assaulting psychiatrists at a rate higher than dentists, nurses, psychiatric nurses, medical doctors, psychologists, and I never knew why. I found out after 7 years.
Yeah.
But they were leery about schizophrenics. You know, but in the prison, it was like the prison is set up for violent, abnormal behavior. I mean, that's what they deal with. That's what they're used to.
Yeah.
So what I did is I formed these groups of schizophrenics who were willing to tell me in real time what their voices were telling them as I was working with them. You know, so what are they saying? What are they doing? What are they telling you? And these 23 patterns started emerging. Right. So then I started wondering, okay, if they're running patterns, what would happen if I started throwing monkey wrenches into the patterns? Right. What if I started disrupting those patterns? What would the voices do? So it wasn't, so I would give these guys homework. So I'd have maybe 10 or 13 of them all the time, all of them hearing voices, all of them willing to tell me in real time what the voices were saying, all of them willing to experiment. They were as curious about what the voices were as I was. They didn't know what they were either, you know, for the most part. So I'd give them, hey, try this and see what the voices do. One of the first ones that came out that I heard at the state hospital was one patient came and told me, hey, when I repeat the 23rd Psalm, my voices react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. They hate it. They can't stand it. You know? So I was like, well, that's interesting. Let's see what happens. You know, so I started handing out copies of the 23rd Psalm to all these guys and say, come back in a week and tell me how your voices reacted. They did not like it. Voices didn't like it. They didn't like them coming to see me. They didn't want them going there. They were telling these guys that I was crazy, I was stupid, I was some mad scientist or something, not to go there. But they came anyway. Because, you know, it's like we were all exploring together. I mean, we're all in the same boat. They wanted to know, I wanted to know, you know. So then let me see what was next. It was what was the next?
That jumps to one of my questions actually, Jerry, because I do ask one of the things I noted about the religious side of things. So I'd like to stay on that subject for a bit longer with the religion. Before I do, I mean, what's your personal thoughts on the Catholics' practice of exorcism, for example?
Well, I think I have to hand it to the Catholics. They're one of the few religions that have actually taken these things seriously and have done something about it. You know, they have exorcisms and they have exorcists that they're training, and those exorcisms do work, and they deal with nastier stuff than I've ever done. You know, and you know, you look at the rest of the Christian church, and it's like, oh yeah, well maybe there's demons, but we're not going to pay any attention to them. We're going to teach all the good stuff. It's not the good stuff that causes the problems. And it's these demons, you know. In the Bible, Jesus cast out demons 23 times. Yeah. And they totally ignore that. It's like, oh, well, that's 2,000 years ago. That's the old hat stuff. There's no demons. Bull crap. Yeah. You know, the biggest trick that the devil ever pulled was getting people to believe that he doesn't exist.
Exactly how these things are hiding. And I did want to ask you, you know, why do you think they pick on particular individuals?
They're like sharks. They attack the weakest. You know, it's like sharks smell blood in the ocean. These guys smell trauma. They smell pain. They smell depression. They're going after the weakest of the bunch.
Yeah. And we're not talking physically weak here, are we?
No, no, we're going to after people who are psychologically damaged. Who, you talk to schizophrenics long enough, and very seldom will you ever find one that didn't suffer some kind of horrific trauma prior to the voices coming on.
And again, with my
They're like hyenas.
exactly, and they hunt in packs.
Yes.
And I've seen this again with the criminals, that I've dealt with and how people have had to arrest. I'm probably one of the very few police officers that, whilst I'm waiting to process them in custody, sometimes we can be waiting an hour or two. So we're just with them, got time with them. And by now they're in handcuffs and they're normally quite calm or getting over it. And I generally go, what's your backstory? I want to know about them a little bit, and they do sometimes look at me and go, why are you asking me that? But they do open up and tell me. And 9 times out of 10, I mean, I'd say 10 times out of 10, really, because I can't actually think of the odd one, but all the time, their backgrounds is being traumatic. They've been sexually abused as children, or alcoholic mothers and fathers, or abandoned, or, brought up in the system that's just failed them. And here they are now in handcuffs in front of me. And it's always because of the trauma. And you can see in their eyes that no one, in my view, no one sets out to be a bad person. It's just they go through a series of things. And if you don't break that cycle, or you don't know how to break that cycle, then you're never going to escape that cycle. And I've arrested sometimes the same person 3 or 4 times. They keep coming back and coming back. And I keep saying to him, you're still with those same people, aren't you? Yeah, I am. You're still drinking bad? Yeah, I am. You're still taking those drugs, aren't you? Yes, I am.
See, that's where the MACE energy method comes in. It gets rid of that trauma.
Right.
It's gone. It's no longer there.
So talk to me about the MACE method then. What is it in essence?
Well, it's an energetic psychotherapy. So your thoughts are energy, your mind is energy, your memory is energy, your feelings are energy, your spirit is energy. And what trauma does is it generates an awful, terrible feeling. Okay. And it just doesn't go away. Right.
Oh.
So the ego shows up and it goes, here, let me handle this. And it takes that trauma and it buries it in the subconscious mind. And then not only buries it alive and then locks it down. So what it causes is an energy ridge. That trauma wanting to get out and the ego wanting to hold it in. So there's a ridge there. It takes a lot of energy to hold that in. And what happens is that in your psychological sphere, if somebody like the person who caused that trauma that was buried shows up in your psychological sphere, that thing gets triggered. It goes off like a firecracker, and it goes and it projects that garbage outside and says, it's that guy out there who's upsetting you. And that guy is very similar to the person who abused them, but now that information is in the subconscious. It's being set off subconsciously, but the feelings well out, and the ego says, okay, either attack them or run from them. So it's fight or flight, or avoid them. But the universe keeps taking care of sending these kind of people to you. It's like the kind of person you hate, no matter where you go, there's one of them there, So the universe is going, well, hey, take another look, and the ego's going, yeah, it's out there. It's not in me.
Right. Yeah.
So what that stuff does is it stays in there and it festers. And every time one of these people show up, there's an explosion. There's a trigger that causes these people a lot of trouble, because these people are constantly, they attack them, they attack back, and then it just gets bad, worse and worse and worse. It keeps piling up. Mace will go in there to that negative identity, and it will take and what Mace found, he wasn't a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or social worker. He was a ship's captain. He drove these big freighters back and forth across the ocean. He was a master mariner. He was a harbor harbor captain. He ran the harbors and stuff. So he's a smart guy. He was always interested in how the mind worked. Okay? So he was always reading all this philosophy and psychology and, the ancient books. I mean, he was always reading, trying to figure it out. So he figured out this negative identity part. Okay? He knew that there were positive and negative identities. So a positive identity you're not worried about. So you have a positive identity as a car driver. Okay. So you remember when you first got to driving a car and you had to pay attention to every single move you made to make sure you didn't do something stupid. Well, now you get in the car, you're not even thinking about it. You're thinking about something else, and you're driving the car without even thinking about it. That's your car, a driver identity. It's doing all the work until something happens where something calls your attention to that, and then you have to alter its automatic behavior. Sometimes you're driving, you don't even know where you're driving. You go, oh, I'm going here, where you didn't intend to go there. So that's what they call a positive identity. It's created on purpose to help you survive on this planet.
Right.
Negative identities are created accidentally, by accident, during a trauma. And then they're buried. And then from that time on, they run like a mind virus in the back of your mind. So you may have this idea from that trauma, like, I'm worthless because of what happened to you then. And you're running your entire life based on that sub program running back there.
But that's just made me think of a visual, actually. It's just sprung to my mind. So the trauma, if we convert that into energy again, is almost like an antenna of negativity broadcasting to these energetic sharks, these EDEs, or whatever word we want to give them, who then, like you say, have a pack mentality and will go, there's another signal there for us to feed on. So that bottling it up in the back of our brains is really transmitting that frequency outwards.
I never thought of it. That would be true.
Yeah. So and then it all starts going wrong. And in our article on our website about the EDE's hypotheses, we discussed the characteristics, which I'd love you to go into a little bit more. But I was going to briefly go over what our ones are, because I think they perfectly align with your characteristics that you've documented. So these things to feed and to survive. I mean, in a way, you got to kind of feel sorry for them. They're just a species trying to survive, just like us. Unfortunately, we're the food source. That's the bit where we don't like it, because we don't want to be a food source for anybody. Because we got this naive belief that we are top of the food chain. Well, actually, we're not. So these things come along, and you've gone through a traumatic time, someone's died in the family, or this has happened to you, that's happened to you. You go through maybe a bad illness, and then you get depressed. Then the radio signals go out, the negativity goes out. These things come and attach themselves. The next thing, before you know it, you're not going out, you're having bad relationships with people that you loved. Your work is failing, maybe you lose your job. You're overeating, you're drinking too much, maybe start taking recreational drugs. And it's just a perpetual cycle going round and round and round before you're isolated completely. And then the voices, and you could correct me here, Joey, because this is actually a guess, but at some point the voices will present themselves. And that is where
they're there almost all the time. Well, to cap off the mace thing, for anybody who's interested in learning more about that system, you can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. We got 3 videos on the mace energy method there. You can watch those and see more how it works. But what you were saying there, David, is these things put thoughts into your mind. Psychiatry, psychology, none of them ever ask, where do thoughts come from? Yeah. Nobody's ever found a thought in a person's brain. All the autopsies they've done, they never found a thought in the person's brain. Right? the answer to what these things are and how they operate is, where do thoughts come from? You know, Manuel Swedenborg, a Christian mystic who lived some 300 years ago, he stated that none of your thoughts are yours. They either come in from heaven or they come in from hell. You're the chooser. You're the radio receiver. So if your station is tuned to a low frequency, you're attracting low frequency entities. Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. If you're at a higher frequency, you're attacking a higher frequency entity. But these things hit all of us. They don't just hit schizophrenics. They're most noticeable with schizophrenics. But I'm sure you spoke in being a policeman that, you know, people jump, they're on a bridge and they're ready to jump off. You know, what's telling them to do that? What's telling these 50,000 people in the United States every year to kill themselves?
Yeah.
There has to be a thought that precedes the behavior.
And the thing that stands us out as a para investigations agency is safeguarding. We're very, very pro safeguarding with people. So we want to get this truth out. We want to document it. We want to be able to prove that it exists, because ultimately we want to bring down the suicide rates. That's what it's going to do. If people can start accepting the truth, which is a hard truth to swallow, I agree. But the more you look into this, the more it makes sense. And then your common sense brain will go, well, actually, that kind of fits. And your brain's doing it because it does. It's true.
Well, see, everybody experiences these things. You know, they call them negative intrusive thoughts.
Hmm.
You know, like you might be standing on the edge of a bridge and you go, I wonder what it would be like to jump, or driving your car and you go, well, what would happen if I turned into oncoming traffic, or stuff like that. I mean, the one I used about a year ago out here in Arizona, we don't much have grass. We have cactus. So you go out with a machete and you chop up the cactus to keep them from overrunning everything. So I have a beautiful husky, pure white husky. And she was out there running around as I was chopping the cactus with a machete. So she runs by, and here's this thought booms into my head, says, chop her head off. And I'm shocked. You know, I'm just shocked. And here I have the machete in my hand.
Wow.
You know, and this thing telling me to chop her head off. It was extremely upsetting.
Yeah, yeah.
I knew it wasn't my thought.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
knew I would never do anything like that, but it was still upsetting. And they were feeding off that upset. That came from them. Okay.
Even
What's so tricky about it is it doesn't sound like something else. It doesn't sound like, hey, where the voices do this. It sounds just like the thousands of thoughts that run through your head at a regular, during a regular day. Only here's these thoughts that come in there that don't match your thought pattern. The intention is very different. You know, the order, what it wants you to do, is very different, but it sounds the same.
exactly.
It's
I want to.
very deceptive that way.
I want to
You
discuss.
think that you think they're yours because, you know, we believe that every thought that shows up in our head belongs to us, because who else could it belong to?
Right.
You know, they don't think that these things are coming in from the outside. Your thoughts are coming from somewhere else. They're not coming from you.
And I want to discuss that part of their characteristics, their ability, really, powerful ability, really, to manipulate and to masquerade and to lie about their identities. Now, if you were to go to an exorcism, maybe, and a young man or young lady is having a fit, and there's a priest doing all the rites and everything else, and then you suddenly get the name Beelzebub or Baal or whatever name they want to come out with. I truly believe that it's none of those things. It's still the entity, but it will be whatever you want it to be. It will sound how you want it to sound. If you want it to sound like Elvis Presley, it will sound like Elvis Presley. You know, it will just absolutely take on any persona
Well,
that it
they
wants.
they can do that. They
Yeah,
can do that
just to
mentally.
make you believe.
So what they could tell you is like, if some girl was molested by her uncle forever, and her uncle dies, you could start hearing voices that sound kind of like him, you know, and knows things that only he would know.
Yeah.
You know, so they can take on the persona of whoever they want, because they can go into your mind and they can see your memories. They can pull up every rotten thing you've ever done and rub it in your face to make you feel negative, because they're energetic. Your memory is energetic.
How
Your
do
thoughts are energetic.
how do you think they, that makes them quite a powerful adversary, that does. How do you think they tap into your memories like that?
I have no idea.
Mm.
I
'Cause
have no idea um, how they steal your energy either.
mm,
But I've felt it. I remember when I was working with psychotic prisoners in the prison, if I worked with two of them, I never would work with any more than two a day, because I'd come home from work and I'd be so drained I couldn't get anything else done.
yeah,
I would just be totally drained.
well, energy vampires, aren't they,
Yeah.
basically?
And I didn't know what was happening then. I just knew that happened. You
So
know,
say
like
say I don't know if you've probably not heard this before. So here's a theory. Okay, Jerry, see what you think of this. Now, I'm trying to work out the mechanism behind them and their actual power. And in your paper, you do mention, I think one of the characteristics is that you state that they are more powerful or more prevalent around the time at 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning.
yes,
So that pricked my ears out. And I thought to myself, well, why is that? It must be because the person is at their lowest vibrational state when in deep sleep generally. Because 3 o'clock in the morning in Arizona is a different, 7 hours behind it is here, but they're still operating, they're still working, aren't they? They're still preying on their victims. But so it must be, it's not the time thing, it's a state of the person. So it must be that time in the morning. And everybody knows that 3 o'clock in the morning has been, it's quite fake, infamous really for being, a bewitching time, or,
mhm.
when,
I've been told that that's when the veil is the thinnest.
yeah, exactly.
But there's another phenomenon that goes on, and they call it oh, it happens with old people when as soon as it gets dark. Um,
Energy crisis, what we call it here.
what do they call it here? Well, they start acting up soon as the sun goes down. They start acting up,
Right.
and they even have a word for it, and I've seen it. You
Okay.
know, so you can. I forgot what they call it. It was on the tip of my tongue.
Would that be the same? And the police believe this in the UK. Okay, what I'm about to tell you, this every police officer believes this. Every time there's a full moon, there is
Yep.
more violent disorder. Every
I ran into that when I was working doing psych crisis in the emergency rooms. I did that for 10 years. And every time it was a full moon, man, we were just bracing ourselves. We knew we were going to get creamed. The
yeah,
psych people would just be pouring in the door.
and science has ignored that as well. That
Yeah.
again, another massive failing in science. But here going back to this wacky theory, okay, about these entities, about how powerful they are. Because I believe in our realm, they're actually quite weak. They have to get you to do their bidding. But in their realm, on their level, they're very powerful, because what they can do is not just tap into your thoughts, they can tap into others that are in the same room or across the other side of the planet. Now, here's why I think this, okay? Now, I'm probably about to upset a lot of medium psychics right now, okay? I don't mean to, but it's a theory I've had for a while that I want to examine in more greater detail about their gift. Now, some psychic mediums are born with a gift, and that's fine, and they live quite productive lives and help people. But other psychics end up getting their gift later on in life, and then their personalities change. They become ill. A lot of them get, medically ill. They get cancers or all sorts of things. But they have a gift. They will go into a room with 30, 40 people, and they will give out messages. They will say where that item is hidden in someone's drawer. They tell these people things that they can't possibly know, unless it was complete fake, of course. But I've been in the presence of these people, and I've seen real accounts of a psychic medium telling somebody something that's impossible for him to know. And that person, and I know the person, that they in no way colludes with the psychic medium. So
I've seen that. I've
here's
seen that
my
over
thing.
and over again.
I fully believe that some, and I emphasize the word some, psychic mediums are given their gift in exchange by the EDEs, by these entities, that they will come and go, we will help you do your thing, but they're going to drain the bloody life out of them. They're going to probably make them ill. And a lot of these psychic mediums do end up being quite reclusive and inwards and getting quite ill, and that, you know, their physical, mental health starts to affect. But the only time they're at their peak is when they're doing their session. They're on stage, as it were, and their adrenaline kicks in and their gift comes and they're giving out great messages, which I think sometimes even surprises the psychic medium themselves. But I think those mediums need to be looking at the source of their information very carefully.
You don't know. You don't know who you're talking to.
Yeah, who is this person? You know, is it Aunt Flo that's helping me, or is it something else pretending to be Aunt Flo? And actually, since I've been doing all this work, and I say to anybody that if you're in the presence of a psychic medium, they give you a message, you should be very grateful for that message, because it comes at a cost to that poor person giving you the message.
Well, the other thing is you don't know where it came from.
No. So these entities are not just diving into your own mental capacity, they're accessing everybody else's that are in that room at the time. And that, I find, the most fascinating and worrying aspects and characteristics of these entities. And that needs to be explored more. And I have tried to contact a couple of psychic mediums and they don't want to talk to me. What a surprise. Because what do these entities do?
Going along with that is the Ouija board.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen a lot of patients who went psychotic on that Ouija board. You know, they start talking to some entity on the Ouija board. They're carrying on conversations and they're all delighted. They're talking to some spirit and they know it's not them. And then all of a sudden it appears in their head and they're talking to it in their head and then it doesn't go away. Ouija boards are very dangerous.
They are dangerous because
they're not toys.
They do open up the energy, because if you invite these things into you, they will come.
Yes.
And a Ouija board is just another way of inviting them in. And if you don't, well, I just don't agree with them at all. I don't agree anybody should be using them, even if you know what you're doing. Because people go, well, I know how to open and close it all and cleanse the energy. Well, one of my cases at the moment is with a shaman, and she's got paranormal activity happening in her house. And she said to me, of all the people I thought this would happen to, didn't think it'd be me, because I know how to cleanse the energy. But that's not how they're very clever. They know how to get around things. And in this case, which I won't go into on this interview, but in this case, they found a way around her to still affect her, and we're helping her through what our suggestions are, and we're doing it in a very step-by-step process and documented the results. But I believe we can still help people that think they are immune to these things, because you're not. What makes you more immune is knowing they exist. I think that's your first self-defense thing. And on our article on this subject, we are suggesting that people need a complete life change to rid themselves of these things. Willing to stop the drinking, stop the drugs, stop the overeating, maybe disconnect from the same cycle of people that are bringing them down, even if they're family members. They've got to break the cycle, and it's going to take a long time. It's not over in a few sessions.
Well, that's one of the earliest things I saw too, is they didn't like anything to do with God, religion, or Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the one patient came to me once, I think I told you, it said when he read the 23rd Psalm, the voices reacted to it like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. You know, so I started handing that out and asking these guys, how did your voices react to it? It was never good.
Oh.
So they don't like, and it's not just the Bible. They don't like the Quran or the Muslim religion either.
I think, see, for me, because I read that in your paper, because you mentioned the Lord's Prayer and singing Amazing Grace as well. To me, I think they are helping because the person believes it'd be a positive action. So I don't believe that religion helps. I think it's the action of positivity, of thinking this is going to help. So it can be any religion, any spiritual practice. If you're doing a positive intention, I think that is exactly the energy you're creating that recoils the entity. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a Christian or a Muslim or Buddhist or even just a spiritual guru to be able to recall these things. You just have to know what they are and do that positive intention, no matter which format you want to do. Because I don't believe really you have to be religious to get rid of these things.
Well, you don't have to be religious, but you do have to be spiritual.
Yeah.
You know, this is a dualistic universe. There's hot, there's cold, there's black, there's white, there's, you know, there's evil spirits and there's good spirits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So Swedenborg says that everybody has 2 guardian angels watching over them all the time. They can't help you unless you ask them. These negative ones, they just barge in and do whatever they want. But you have to actually ask the positive spirits to come and help you.
With the people with multiple personality disorders, where they have a series of different entities, do you think that's what it really is, or is it something else?
No, I think that's not psychosis. It's a very interesting phenomenon. It's very rare. So one of the personalities could be deadly allergic to shrimp, okay? But another personality in that person can go eat all the shrimp at once. So that's something very different from this what do they call it, possession or obsession or whatever that is with these negative entities. But you have to realize that they can put thoughts into your head. Swedenborg says every negative thought that comes into your head comes from them.
Right.
So you have to watch what you're thinking.
Are these things, if you are suffering from multiple personality disorder, they must still be an external source, right? There must be something. I mean, what you just explained there is that an energetic energy is able to affect the physical. So in one personality, he will be allergic to shrimp, but in the other personality, he's not. So something changes the physiology of that person. So that must still be an entity of some type, mustn't it?
Well, it's the other personality. So it might be, it probably is another type of entity, another personality that just takes them over, because they don't react the same way they do with the first personality. The personality completely changes. But it's extremely rare.
Yeah, it is very rare. No, it's a fascinating talk. Wonderful speaking to you about this, because it's just nice to see that somebody can see them for what they are, and and quite freely express that. I mean, you run a daily practice. Do you have to still deal with these entities yourself even now?
Well, they're pretty hard to get rid of. So I can tell people how to fight back against them. Give them techniques and tactics to fight back against them. And with the mace energy method, we can go in there and remove the trauma that they feed off of, but it's still pretty hard to get rid of them. I mean, mace will get rid. So there's 2 sections there. You got the negative identity. That's like the program running in the back of that person's mind. We can get rid of that.
Yeah.
Okay. But a negative entity is a lot harder to get rid of, but you can get rid of its food source, what it feeds off of. Mace will do that.
That's your depression, your cycle of negativity,
or the traumas that build up, or the trauma relationships that build up. Okay.
And do you think storing these negative energies for some amount of time will take a physical effect on your body as well, such as maybe being on a cancer?
Well, you know what? That's always surprised me. A lot of them are fairly healthy, but they eat bad. I mean, these things don't want you to be healthy. They want you weak. They don't want you to sleep. They don't want you to eat good food. They want you weak so they can take over. So what they're trying to do is push the original personality out of the way and then take over. And they do know things that the person himself doesn't know. I've talked to a number of prisoners, especially meth addicts. I've seen more people go psychotic on meth than any other drug. And the prisoners call it the devil's drug. It's a very dangerous drug. It will make you psychotic and you will stay there. It may come on first like you start hearing voices and you go, well, that's just a hallucination. And then when you come down, it goes away. So you're even more convinced that it's a hallucination. And that may happen 10, 20, 50 more times. And then one day, the voices don't go away. You're just as crazy as anybody in the mental hospital.
Yeah.
So
that drug must be doing, well, expediting really the effects of that negativity energy for these things to feed on.
Yeah, the prisoners used to call it the devil's drug.
Yeah, we can see why now. I mean, even, from my experience as a police officer, the most difficult to deal with people are those that have a concoction of meth, heroin, cocaine, because not that it should be used at all, but cocaine's not as pure as it maybe was years ago. So that's got a lot of poisonous substances within it now. And even now, the hemp, the weed, the grass, whatever you want to call it, is now sprayed with very dangerous chemicals, which are pushing people into psychosis, where 20, 30, 40 years ago, people used to smoke cannabis just as a relaxant and just to, de-stress from the day. Nowadays, it's grown a completely different way with all sorts of drugs sprayed over to make it stronger. And those drugs, I believe, are causing more problems than giving that person just a relaxant. It's changing them. It's making them, and I've seen it. People say, "Oh, you can't get psychotic on cannabis." Well, actually, I do have a lot of people that are psychotic on cannabis, and but the main thing I see is a mix of alcohol and cocaine as well. It's just difficult. When those people go into those state of minds on those two drugs, they're so difficult to control. They don't feel pain. You have to use extra force to
they're supernaturally strong.
Yeah, they're very strong. And I've had to work so many times. I've been attacked many times. And they're always got very diluted pupils, very verbal, as they always are when on cocaine. They can take on the world. And it takes about sometimes 3-4 officers to really get control of somebody.
Yeah, they're supernaturally strong.
Yeah, and when they're standing in front of the custody sergeant and they go, well, what have you taken tonight? I can always put my, money in a hat and say that I bet I've taken alcohol and cocaine. Heroin addicts are different. They're still very volatile, but their behaviours are very different. They don't want to take on the world, but they go into a completely different state of psychosis where they aren't in danger to themselves and other people, but they're very different people. None of it is good.
Yeah, the meth addicts, the ones I talked to in the prison, the voices would tell them where to be and when to be there to get more meth when they ran out. And they would show up at that spot and a complete stranger would show up with more meth. I mean, they know stuff that the victim himself does not know.
Exactly. That's what that makes me go back to my psychic medium theory, that these things are operating on a completely different level and able to tap into many subconscious at one time and operate that way. So here's a bonus question, Jerry. Right, this one it's been met with skepticism when I brought this up, but I think there's some merit in it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So here it goes. Strap in. So I'm going to read it from my script. So it is our theory that pop, rock, and film stars have acquired their talents and successes with the help of these EDEs, and in return, their mental health is surrendered. In fact, they hand over the stars' own free will. Despite their immense wealth and success, some of these stars lead very unhappy lives. We believe at some point in their lives, a conscious or unconscious deal was made. To this day, Hollywood and the music industry appears to be riddled with corruption and wrongdoing. Looking at recent activities such as people like Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, P. Diddy, the mysterious deaths of Prince, Michael Jackson, Chris Cornell. I mean, the list could go on about how many stars just die well before they should go.
Yeah, and now they're leaving the country. Now they got Diddy. You got Oprah Winfrey ran away.
What a surprise!
Generous jumps a plane and takes off out of the U.S. Yeah, the Hollywood is the devil's workshop.
Yeah, so that was the last question. Do you think these entities are controlling more than we realise?
I think they are. They're, if you go to my website and you look up these list of patterns that I sent you,
yeah,
that's exactly what's coming over the mainstream media right now.
Those here, got it all here.
All those right there. One to one. You look, it's the same crap coming over the mainstream media.
Yeah. And that's when I've expressed this, people go, well, they got into film or the rock stars because of a talent. Well, my argument is, I mean, you can see my guitar in the background. I used to be in a rock band when I had lovely hair once, Jerry. Our band was a really good band. We had an amazing singer and we were good musicians and we wrote really good songs and we had a good following, but we never got our break. We just never got it. I wonder sometimes, though, that there are some actors or musicians that go to Hollywood with all their good intentions to become big and rich, but they end up sweeping floors or working at McDonald's or Wendy's somewhere. And then one day they go home, they cry in a corner to themselves and they say, I just want this. If you give this to me, I'll do whatever you want. When you're in that low state of vibrational sadness and depression,
that'll do it.
Desperation, I think something does come to them and they literally do a deal with the devil without realizing it.
There's a handful of them who admitted this.
They do.
They actually admitted it. I wanted this. I wanted the fame. I wanted the money. I wanted the fortune. So I made a deal with the devil and I got it.
I got it. Yeah. And then they suddenly are amazing guitarists or singers.
Yeah.
I mean, some singers you will see, which I won't mention because I don't upset people's music taste, but you do wonder how on earth they amass such millions. And in one lady's example, billion, when really, if you look at the raw voice itself and what that person is, it's not really that talented. But somehow this person or these persons have been escalated to such a level where they are getting millions and billions of fans all over the world, amassing fortunes. But yeah, I just can't find the words to work out how that works. And I truly believe that they do those deals. Yeah. Sometimes they will go and be taken to these deals. Like there are people in the industry that, we've all heard the rumors about satanic rituals.
Yeah.
Satanic rituals over album releases, and then they get, they become very successful. I think these people sometimes consciously are entering into these contracts. And the ones that go into unconsciously are the ones that probably having that little cry moment in the corner one day to themselves. And then suddenly, within the next few weeks, the phone starts ringing. They start getting those parts, or they get that album deal, and things start happening for them because these entities are manipulating the entire ether and ecosystem of this. And they know damn well that if they have full control around this arena, they're going to have victims of food sources all the time.
Yeah, you look what's going on in the world right now. The Ukraine war, what is it? 700,000 Ukrainians are dead now. For what? Vietnam War? What did that accomplish? You look at all the misery all over the world, all the killing, all the fighting, all the angst. I mean, it's a hog's trough for these entities.
Yeah, and we've got, take away the rock star, pop star analogy. This is the same thing for politicians too. Our ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson, there was a photograph of him in the newspaper with him holding a ram's skull because he went through his university and they'd done this silly ceremony where he had to do something quite rude to a ram's skull with horns on it. And they think, oh, this is a laugh, I'll just do this. They don't realise they're actually entering into a ritual to get what they want. And then I mean, Boris Johnson should never have been in a position to run anything. He can't even run for a bus, let alone run a country. And yet somehow he finds himself in that position.
Yeah, look at the fool we have running our country right now. Complete idiot, the geriatric nutcase.
I'm still not sure he knows he's lost or not yet.
No, yeah, he can fight his way out of a wet paper bag and goes roaming, craps his pants at one of the big, get-togethers, the UN convention or something, and just recently wandered off into the Amazon jungle. They had to go fetch him back out of, so he's just a friggin' puppet.
Yeah, and these
you got the demonic monstrosities underneath him who fired those missiles at Russia just now. It's trying to start a nuclear war. They're trying to get us killed off.
Yeah, and it's the normal man in the street does not want war. They don't want war. It's the few, unfortunately, that want the war to keep the industrial, complex going. We don't want war. Nobody wants war. I mean,
they do.
Yeah, they do. I mean, when we meet people from different cultures, we will always have a protective barrier going because we don't understand them. Oh, what are they about? So there's always going to be this defense mechanism. But once you actually know people and get to know people and understand their differences and ideologies, and they're actually, you realize they're just people who love their kids just like you do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what they're wearing or how they look or what they want to believe in, but when you actually get to know the people themselves, we're all quite the same.
Right. It's the government that are killing people.
It's that divide us, which is, hurtful. Especially, I'm a government contractor. I have to work for government, so I know how they work and how they departmentalize everything. But it's sickening, and I just feel that these entities are the root cause for most of these problems. And
I think you're right.
We've got to wake up. We've got to fight back, and that can only come with a new disclosure. So we've got the whole UAP, UFO disclosure movement going on. I'm still a bit skeptical about its motivations, but it's happening. We need one now for a spiritual disclosure about how we're being affected by these things. But
your chances of recovering from schizophrenia, if you're not aware that those voices are not you, that they're coming from somewhere else, is very slim. So if you believe the psychiatric mafia that these things are auditory hallucinations due to a chemical brain imbalance, you're being lied to, and you're never going to recover. They don't want you to recover. They've cut down the research monies for schizophrenia down to nothing. They don't want you recovering. They want you taking these toxic drugs that are neurologically damaging with long-term use and paying them a fortune to keep getting these drugs that are not abusable. There's no reason they need a prescription. Nobody in their right mind or wrong mind wants to take these drugs. They turn you into a zombie. You don't get high. You turn into a friggin' slobbering zombie. Yet the psychiatric mafia is holding on to those things, like clutching onto them for dear life. You go into Mexico, you can get them over the counter. You just say, hey, I want Risperdal, and they'll give it to you over the counter. There's no reason for them to milk us to death. It cost $800, $900 for a month's supply of these antipsychotic drugs. You go into Mexico, you say you want the same thing made by the same companies a lot of the time with Mexican labels. It's $75 a month. So they're just ripping off the Western world because they can get away with it.
Yeah, and they are.
This is big pharma. This is they're evil.
And it's like the old saying goes, just follow the money.
Yep.
If you want to get, understand the motivation of someone, just follow the money, and there you are. I mean, for an industry to have made billions in profit out of a alleged pandemic, you follow the money. That's where your real cause of of the criminals are, in my view, and that needs. I heard rumblings that Trump is going to bring some people to justice. I'd love to see that happen. So fingers crossed that happens.
He will do it if they don't kill him first.
He's also got to remember that he was empowered during the pandemic too, wasn't he? So I'm a bit skeptical.
Well, yeah, but he was kind of overwhelmed with it. He
Mm.
didn't know who he was facing when he got into Congress because he wasn't a politician.
No.
He was a businessman. So he gets in there and here's all these snakes around him, telling him this, telling him that. He didn't know who the players were. He didn't know what they were up to. He didn't know which ones were evil, which ones were good guys. I mean, he was just, now he does.
There
He
we go.
knows who all the players are. He knows what they're all up to. He knows who did what.
Yeah.
They do not want him in.
And we here in the UK hope that House of Cards falls with a great crash so that we can hear it across here in Europe.
You will hear it. He's already taken a shot at that bozo you got running your country over there.
Yeah, and then, my sentiments as well. So, Jerry, look, we could go on for hours and hours, but I really do thank you for joining me this evening. So, evening here, I know it's daytime there, and talking about the subject. I'd love to be able to discuss maybe further developments in the future with you. That's okay. But yeah, thank you again for joining us. I'm just going to hand over to you, and you can just tell the people how they can contact you in their various ways.
Well, you can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. It's an MARZINSKY. And we've got scores of videotapes on this subject there. We've got things that you can do to help yourself if you're schizophrenic, how to fight back against the voices. You can order this book there. This tells about how we found that the voices were not hallucinations, that they were actual entities. It also kind of exposes psychiatry for, the frauds they are. Okay. So yeah, that's at jerrymarzinsky.com.
Brilliant. And I'm going to try and get a copy of that, Jerry. I'd love it if I can try and get a signed one. How likely is that to be?
I think you'll find it entertaining.
Oh, I definitely want to read that. So thank you for that. And for SEPI Agents themselves, you can find us on sepi-agency.com, or go to our YouTube channel at SEPI Agency. Find us there, and for more updates on this open investigation. And thank you for listening so far. Please be sure to look out for our new video on extra-dimensional entities.
Don't be so scared of
where we dive into their behaviour a little deeper and explain what you can do to fight back.
Don't be so scared of the monster underneath your bed.
Do good and be kind. And if you have any cases to bring to us, please visit the website and click Report an Incident button.